Hi everybody, hope you can see me and you hear me. Nobody's come through just as yet, but I anticipate one or two of you will drop in for a little chat and a catch up. And as we talk all things Mr. Humphrey, sadly dear departed. So nobody's showing us as tuned in yet, but hopefully that will catch up very shortly. Oh dear. Am I on my Jack Jones? Hello, Catherine. Hello, Michaela. Good to see you on. What a lovely evening. No sound. Interesting. Well, just check. Is the sound? I'll switch up mics, but yeah, can see and hear me. Lynn can see and hear me, so I'm going to take it that was a temporary aberration. Yeah, sorry, Leslie. It was for some reason my phone just started in portrait mode, so I had to shut it down and start again. So lovely. Thank you, Diane. Hugs to you back as well, and to everybody who's been through the situation that we've been through. Thank you, Leslie, for letting me know. In what, 2 weeks now, I guess, isn't it? And we'll talk about that, but we'll do some happy stuff as well, and do a memorial. So Kathy, Deirdre, Leslie, Diana, hello Tish. Just do some hellos. Michaela said hello too, I think. Susan O, and Lynn Hall. Hi, hi Lynn, and Catherine M is with us. So how nice to have you all here. Lovely sunny evening here in York. It's early evening. It is coming up 8 o'clock local time, so we're getting the kind of the last of the day's sunshine. But hello, Sandy. Very nice it is too. So my beard is just annoying me. My moustache should have given that a trim. Getting a bit Captain Birdseye on here. Excuse my cough. 23 on now, so we've got a few. So I'm not quite sure what the time is. Hello, Ronnie, then, but I suspect we are kind of there or thereabouts. So I'm just going to let these guys kind of pass by, and then we'll get you started in a second. So yeah, just to kind of clarify where we are on Hobmore, which we've been to on one or two occasions on this tour. If the signal, if at times is a little bit patchy, then we'll kind of continue walking through that, and we may or may not encounter cows. There are cows on here. I don't know exactly where they are, depending on the obviously location. Hello, Fran. Hello, Emily. Thank you, Emily. Yeah, posted on the old stream. Yeah. So basically, what happened was, hello, Dawn. We opened and it was in portrait format. Your phone's the wrong way around. So unfortunately, once it started, it won't allow you to then kind of move. So consequently, I had to just kind of flip that round. So that's why we had to go out and start again. Probably me doing something wrong, bit out of practice, not really been doing much touring of late. The plane going over, something very, very loud in the background, and we'll just give these folks another few seconds just to make their way exit stage left, my left, your right. And then we will start in. And hello, Bridget. Lovely to have you on. So let's just have one day over here. We'll flick the screen, and we'll try and avoid the cow poo. That's always good, isn't it? If you can avoid getting poo on your shoes. And hello, Julie. So we are here on Hobmore. I'll just show you the signage interpretation board. So we're just here. Oh, Susan, you bless you. Just near home. So Julie, we're on Hobmore Local Nature Reserve. So we're in West York. We're about kind of 2 miles. As the kind of crow flies, if you've got eagle eye when we come up sort of towards Humphrey's Bridge, which I'm going to show you, then you should be able to see maybe in the distance. I'll try and give a bit of a close-up. The outline of the Minster. So we're kind of way over there. So we're starting on down here, the kind of North Lane pasture. We're going to live about 10 minutes walk away from here. So consequently, the reason I kind of started this, because I approached this tour with kind of no little trepidation. Tour's the wrong kind of word, isn't it, really? Kind of tribute, I suppose, is perhaps a better way of putting it. Of thinking, well, what should I do? When I thought, should I just do a bunch of videos? Because obviously, like everybody else, you're so daft out with for our pets that I've got literally hundreds of hours, no doubt. Hello, Linda. Literally hundreds of hours of kind of footage, which is great for us, but probably a little bit boring and repetitive for you guys, kind of tracing, his life or the time that he sort of spent with us. So I thought about doing this at home, but then when I started going through the footage, because obviously it would have taken quite a while to pull that together. I'm not going to deny it. It was difficult, kind of looking at it. It's still obviously very fresh, very very raw. And the thing is, I thought that we would be better to go to a place where kind of Humphrey was at one, as you might say. Well, the cows moved to Cottonthorpe. Is that what you're talking about, Julie? So consequently, here we are. And yes, there's the moor. No, Sandy, that was Ilkley Moor. This is my local moor. So consequently, as I'm walking round here, all this is shot through with memories. From as recently as kind of 2 weeks ago, and for instance, this cattle trough. Hello, Catherine. At the end of his walk, Humphrey would be in here, drinking often green, stagnant water. Hello, Rosemary. Us shaking his heads at how skanky he was, but unfortunately, that's what he was. He was skanky. So that's a good question there. So let's kind of start somewhere approximating the beginning, as Leslie has just, and then we'll kind of walk up, and I'll try and give you what we're going to say, not a kind of a line by line, because obviously my memory will kind of differ, but nonetheless, I'll try and give you something approximating, let's go this way, a kind of rough sort of chronology, if you like, of having Humphrey. So we got Humphrey in February of 2020. So we had him 4 years and a half, almost coming up 4.5 years in total. And Humphrey, well, we're going to talk about that in a minute, Julie. So if you just keep that thought, as you might say. He came to us as a rescue. We didn't know much about him. So that's it. We had to pay a fair bit to get him kind of sorted out, and then obviously the vet's bill subsequently were astronomical, to say the least. And thankfully, of course, at one stage you guys helped out enormously with that, for which we are forever grateful. But basically, it'd been obviously the lockdown, and I spent my kids, and to degree me as well, like a lot of people, kind of climbing the walls. We were, I suppose, all struggling, in our own different kind of ways, but to kind of make sense of this sudden kind of lack of freedoms that we were all kind of being forced to accept, but also a sense it was a blank check of our time, wasn't it? Insofar as, 4 lovely years around, we didn't know exactly when it was going to end, so there was a kind of sense of a lack of power, agency. I think is a kind of modern word, isn't it? Having agency over a situation. It felt like we lacked agency. Just as a complete aside from that, I think it must be the same, or at least it's the same. There's a parallel with York 1,000 years ago, when the Vikings arrived. You can imagine these kind of savages, or what appear to be savages, arriving from the sea, and just basically taking control by sheer force of violence and outwitting, but better kind of equipment and so forth. So I suspect they can also felt a kind of sense of kind of lack of agency, and their ability to kind of define what the future was going to look like. So in the midst of this, with both my kind of girls sort of struggling, the younger two that is, we were again approached to get a dog. And this wasn't the first time that asked, that it had been a kind of fairly constant request over the years. But on this occasion, it sort of felt a bit different for a couple of reasons. Firstly, obviously, just the sheer bizarreness of the sort of situation. But the second was, both my wife and I were now working at home. So consequently, okay, Trist, it's lovely to have you on. However, brief, our tryst is with Trist. It's delightful to have you here. So we felt actually the excuses, if you like, to sort of not have a dog had dwindled somewhat. So we got Humphrey, and we found him obviously kind of via website. Went to collect him down in Lincolnshire, so it was about kind of 2-hour drive. It wasn't like he was really close. In some respects, really a good thing. There was no chance of him kind of running into people that he'd known in his kind of previous life. He came back with us, he was kind of good as gold on the way back, and he was really for the first sort of couple of weeks. But looking back now, what I kind of recognise is he was just incredibly withdrawn. Luckily, I'd done a little bit of research because I hadn't really had a dog since I'd been a kid. And whilst you might have kind of grown up with dogs, it's a real big difference to having lived in a house with dogs. We had 3 dogs, to having responsibility for a dog. And I'm sure those that you have had pets, will kind of recognise the big difference between just being a kid and the dog's there and other people feed it and walk it and this, that, and the other, to being your responsibility for their welfare and vets bills and all this, that, and the hello, Leonie. And so, you know, there was kind of an element of that. So, you know, we picked him up, and I'd say he was very withdrawn, but in the research that I'd kind of done beforehand, they said this kind of thing of threes is really important. Kind of 3 days is just kind of decompression. 3 weeks is what it'll take for them to start to feel like they've got some anchorage, if you like, in life. And then kind of 3 months is what it should take for them to start to feel like they can, I suppose they've got some agency, do you know what I mean, that they're able to get a sense of, okay, this is my new kind of reality, this is new people, this is where I live, and can I get used to the house and all that kind of stuff. So we were kind of aware that there was going to be this period of kind of transition, kind of settling in. The one thing that I kind of noticed, which again, should have alerted me really, because apparently it's kind of a sign of quite a lot of danger, is when he first came to us, you could see the whites of his eyes all the time. And I thought, usually you don't normally see that in dogs. I then kind of subsequently found out it means that it means that they feel dangerously insecure and unfortunately are prone to attack, which is of which more later. But this is the kind of first, I suppose, real location of significance, apart from the water trough on there, insofar as this was Humphrey's Bridge. And what you've got is you've got a series of becks that run across this moor, but this is the kind of the main one. And Humphrey loved nothing more than to run, it's a beautiful evening, yeah, to run along. He'd do a limbo underneath here, so you can see at the bottom there that he could just about to get under that, which wasn't great because his back end was knackered, as many of you all know. And we'd play catch up. And what he would do is, as soon as he got on whichever way, depending on which sort of side of the moor we'd started on, once he got free of that, he would then do a sprint. I'm going to take it on the route that he would kind of go down. Still can't see any cows. So I think, oh, the cows are right over there in the distance, so I don't think we're going to see them on this tour. And it was his thing, we called it Humphrey doing his laps. And he loved nothing more than to do at times 2 or even 3 of these laps at high speed between that little bridge and a gate that we're going to come to at the moment. And all throughout winter and spring, the gate was open, and then one day the cows arrived and the gate was shut, and Humphrey was most displeased with this kind of turn of events. But other than that, he loved it here, and that's really the reason I thought that of all the places we could come, this was kind of the most suitable to remember him, because if animals have a spirit that continues on, you know, into the next life, then I really hope that Humphrey's here. I can feel him here, if that makes sense, because whilst there's a lot of places kind of nearby that we'll also go to, I'm going to show you one of them. We're going to walk across, it's about kind of half a mile away from here, on this kind of tour, because it's a kind of nice evening to show you a bunch of stuff. But I think, you know, it's kind of, when we think about our animals, you know, we don't really want to think about them, do you know what I mean, in their kind of final months and weeks where they are kind of suffering. Really what we want to think of them is when they're at the happiest, at the most joyous, at their, you know, the time when they're most alive, most engaged. And Humphrey wasn't just, I mean, for those who don't know about him, he was what they call a sprudel. So he was a, keep them close, absolutely. I mean, that's the same with people though, isn't it? You know, he's the people we let into our hearts. People, animals, places, you know, places we feel very special about. Oh, I'm so sorry, Natalie, to hear about your uncle. My condolences. It doesn't much matter in the final reckoning, you know, who it is or what it is, whether it's animal or human. When it comes to letting go and saying goodbye, that's something that we're just not very, very good at. Dawn misses little Misty every day, you know, and that's good, isn't it? In some respects, it's hard, but it's good for us. It is, you know, that's what being alive is, isn't it? That's what being human is having this feeling that we don't lose them, but that we carry then a pain. And that's the kind of trade-off, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Is the flip side of the coin of love is loss. And that can be our parents, it can be our friends, it can be siblings, it can be aunties and uncles. You know, for instance, this year, you know, I lost, there's just my mum alive now, who was a kind of adult when I was a kid. The last of my family, you know, are kind of dying off. So you kind of get, okay, so, you know, you do get that kind of sense of you moving through kind of life in stages. And whilst I wouldn't associate kind of losing a dog with a particular stage in life, nonetheless, I do think that it is a profound kind of sense of loss, because you invest. So we're back at Humphrey Bridge. We've done a Humphrey lap. You invest so much into them, as you might say, and they become part of your family. And I can't understand people, when you, not only do you break your heart, we'll just say about Humphrey Bridge for a minute, when you hear about people mistreating animals, but you think, what on earth do they get from that? How damaged you have to be as an individual to feel like you're going to feel better by imposing, violence or mistreatment, neglect, whatever you want to call it, on an animal that can't answer back and can't anticipate what you're doing, and to a degree is sort of trapped into the situation. So I don't mean to kind of bring the mood down in any kind of way. So this is the beck, by the way, down here. And as you can see, it's pretty low because we've had nothing but dry weather. So unfortunately, we've got a hosepipe ban coming from this Friday, which Mrs. John is not at all happy about. Ronnie, I think we all do. They stay with us as companions. We can all remember pretty much every pet we ever had. I mean, I've got to be honest, some of the small furry creatures the kids had when they were little, that you kind of, you get them because they're less to keep. So, and unfortunately, a largely anonymous now, list of gerbils and guinea pigs, not the rabbits. The rabbits were delightful. They kind of blend together a little bit. But I think dogs and cats too, of course. It's a different thing, isn't it? Because we get more from them. And so consequently, we invest in those relationships, I think, in a wholly different way. So that when that loss comes, it's felt incredibly keenly. It's not something we can easily brush off. And so it was with Humphrey. So a little bit about kind of what happened, and then we'll go a bit backwards and forwards, if that's okay with you. So Natalie's still missing, a box of Bob. Still in your heart. It's fabulous. I mean, it's how it should be. The pain and love, two sides of the same coin, unfortunately. So what happened with Humphrey? Well, as many of you will know, I mean, obviously the most notable thing about Humphrey was when he broke his neck, because I obviously had to tell everybody about that, and you guys stepped up big time, which is fabulous. But there was a much longer term issue, which we discovered fairly early on. And the reason we discovered it is that we'd only had him, oh God, now, I'm going to say a week, 10 days, somewhere in that order. So it was kind of really, really early on in him being with us. And he was sat on the sofa and he was kind of stretched out a bit, and I want to sit down. And so I just sort of tapped him, really lightly tapped him on his back end. And he turned around and he gave me a really nasty nip. And I was kind of really shocked. Not shocked because I couldn't believe that a dog would bite, but that little kind of provocation would be sufficient. And so, we really ummed and ahed about it. I thought, God, what have we done? We've brought this rescue animal into our home. Is he in effect now a hazard? How are we going to kind of manage this? How's it going to work? And so we thought about it for about a week or so. I thought, I'm not going to do anything sort of drastic. I'm not going to do anything rash. I'm going to let's talk about it. Myself and my wife. Obviously, the kids were very upset because they thought maybe he was going to have to go and all this stuff. We would have got him. So I said, well, I'll tell you what. I said, let's take him to the vets and let him have a look at him, give him a physical examination. And obviously, if there's a physical issue that we can sort out, let's look at that. But obviously, if it's a behavioural issue and he's just kind of, I'd say a bad dog, but a dog that's too damaged to be able to easily sort of fit in with a kind of family, then we'll kind of cross that bridge. So kind of booked him in to see the vet. They examined him and he was quite responsive around the kind of back end. So the vet said, I think the best thing is to do an x-ray. Now, if any of you have had a dog x-rayed, but it's quite a big deal because they won't stay still, you see. So consequently, they have to have a general anaesthetic. So it's quite a big deal and quite expensive, about 500 or 600 quid, something like that. So anyway, we took him into, we couldn't, not our regular vets, but they have like a branch the other side of York that was able to do this. So took him in and he was kind of knocked out and picked him up a bit later on in the day. And hello, Polly. And The upshot of this X-ray was that he, and I never get this right, but you guys will know, is it dysplasia, something like that? It's that where basically, you know, the hip joint, you've kind of got a ball and socket, haven't you? That in an ideal world, the nice smooth joint fits nicely into the cup, if you like. Do you know what I mean? The indentation, the hollow, whereby everything moves nicely, and you've got cartilage to, you know, reduce any discomfort and pain as you can walk around, and that's kind of normal. And it happens to humans as well, doesn't it? You know, but I'm sure many of you either yourselves will have suffered from kind of bad hips or know people that have. And so kind of hip replacement is that's right, hip dysplasia is a pretty kind of normal routine kind of thing. So what the vet said was, well, we didn't really know how old he was. I mean, they thought about 6, but again, we didn't have any information, you know, from a breeder and like that. We were just supposing, and part of it was based on the condition of his teeth. You know, that's apparently quite a good sign. I didn't realise, but if you talk to people that know about dogs, they'll tell you that, you know, that their teeth kind of degrade over time. You know, both in terms of wearing down and kind of filing down. Particularly like Humphrey, they're kind of mouthy. They like chewing and biting on things. You know, but also the sort of stand of the plaque and all this kind of stuff is a good indication. So the vet looked at it and said, we think he's about 6. So ideally, he should have had that operation, a double hip replacement, when he was kind of in that kind of, you know, maybe 9 months to a year old. That would be the optimal time. And then the recovery rates from that would be brilliant. But as that opportunity had been lost, the further degrading that had happened with the wear and tear over the years meant that it might not just be his hips, that there could be kind of knock on with the kind of rest of his back end, his knees and so forth, and that he was a much kind of not higher risk, but there was a far lower chance that he was going to be dead straightforward. And of course, as well, it was going to be very expensive. And, you know, at this time, obviously, we just got him, and so we were kind of being asked to consider, you know, something running into thousands of pounds. And understandably, we were reluctant. So the vet said, what we can do is, he said, you know, let's see if we can have a pain management regime. And so that seemed to us to make, you know, absolutely kind of perfect sense. I'm just going to go into the shade now, because I think he was, Leslie, I think he'd been in pain every day of his life. So, you know, when it came to it and you feel sort of terrible about being in pain, I don't think he was a stranger to it. And I know a lot of you suffer from chronic pain, so you'll kind of know and empathise and sympathise with what that's like, and perhaps that the world doesn't always understand pain as well as it should. But nonetheless, I just thought a little, as we're walking on, just before we leave the moor, this is just a little video. Oh, it's actually one around the block. I thought it was on the moor, actually. We have a little walk round, and on this occasion, he's sniffing and looking for dandelions, because that was his favourite snack. And you've found many of them on here, but on this occasion, I thought this was a moor video, actually. But this is him seeking out they are looking at, we call them lollipops. So I'm just going to have a little drink. I think it's about 45 seconds. So let's let you watch Humphrey licking his lollipops while I just have a little sip of water just to freshen up.
Very nice.
So he really would go from one to another. And I'd say when he's on here, and obviously as you'll know, you know, once you get the bloom of these things, you know, once they come up, it's sorry, as ever, forgetting how to get rid of this. There we go. You know, it is. You know, there'll be thousands of them on here. You know, so it's a walk, because obviously we let him off the lead up here. And he got a lot better with other dogs at the time. Yeah, I had to check it out, Leslie, you know, and say, you know, is this like a potentially toxic thing? Because I didn't know really whether they could eat dandelions. I mean, you don't. It's not the sort of knowledge that we're kind of equipped with organically. But apparently it's absolutely fine, as long as they're kind of fine with it and it doesn't affect them in any way negatively, then that's fine. It was just kind of one of his idiosyncrasies. So that was Humphrey. So we're going to go onto the railway line. This is the York to London, or rather the Edinburgh to London railway. We're walking underneath. So if a train comes over, it will have rattle. It's a surprisingly low, is this. So halfway through, I'm going to start sort of stooping, even though I wouldn't brush my hair. So I don't know if you heard that then. I don't know if the signal dropped at all as I kind of walked through. If it did, hopefully it'll kind of re-establish itself very shortly. But we've just come out the other side, so we're on now. Yeah, we should be back now, Dawn. I thought that was the case. So we've just basically gone onto the mainland railway line. So inevitably, we're going to lose a bit of signal. So let's go over here. There's some nice flowers. Yeah, sorry, Leon. I'm not surprised, basically. I'm sure you've encountered it before. You go into somewhere, it's a pretty kind of solid concrete structure. But it's not a pleasant place to walk under. You feel like you kind of brush your hair. So consequently, as I say, the vet advised we to kind of trace and pain management, which we did, and that kind of worked well. And there were some more biting incidents, not going to lie. In fact, there were 6 in total. Some were nips, some were nastier. But I think we all kind of learnt. So Natalie, we think he was about 10 when he died, possibly 11. We're not entirely sure. We at least got to a stage where we think, we could have understood and we could tolerate. So again, if those of you that live with dogs, particularly those that are a bit more on the feral side, as you might say, as Humphrey definitely fit into that category, there's a range of responses they can do. They can growl at you, they can snarl at you, show you the teeth, they give you a nip, they give you a bite, or they can really go for you. And of course, the last one is the most dangerous one, because particularly if it comes out warning, it's unpredictable, then you're in trouble because you can't necessarily avoid those kind of situations. So consequently, that was at the kind of the top of our minds, as you might say, was, can we manage his behaviour? Can we predict it? Can we all be safe and enjoy it, but appreciate that, he'd been damaged. I mean, he'd been moved from pillar to post. I think the previous people that had him, that passed him on to us without really sort of saying why, had him 3 or 4 months. So I think pretty clear to me that he'd probably bitten somebody, probably bitten a grandchild. And, being pushed on from kind of pillar to post as some kind of unwanted package, I think had done sort of substantial damage to his kind of emotional well-being. And he never really fully recovered from that. There's always a kind of sense of insecurity. And right from very, very early on, he attached himself to me like a limpet. I mean, the fact that, if I was cooking or whatever, sort of just stood backwards, then, I'd tread him and what a fuss he would make. But he was always at my feet. He would sleep with me, just so he was a constant companion. And so getting back to kind of what changed, as you might say, is about 2 years ago, we changed him onto a drug called Librela. I don't know if any of you kind of come across it with your animals, but it was the kind of the latest breakthrough in kind of pain management for kind of arthritis and pain in the back end. And it worked really well. It gave him a whole new lease of life. And he was doing really well. If you remember, I think some of you may well remember, then about 18 months ago, we had the awful situation where I took him to the vet one day because he had to have like regular blood tests to make sure these drugs weren't kind of causing damage to his internal organs, because they have the potential to do so. And Jose, who's a Portuguese guy, lovely guy, our vet, moved on now, but was our vet, said, you're going to have to stop the ball chasing. It's causing much more wear and tear than you're kind of perhaps aware of. And so consequently, we had to sort of stop that, which was, really hard, because I think right from when we first kind of got him, it was really kind of apparent that the only time that he was really happy during the day was when we were out on an evening with the ball, on the moor, or the Nacemeyer, wherever we'd kind of take him. And so that felt like a huge deal to kind of take that away from him. That sort of, a bit like taking away the sort of favourite part of the day for an animal. So that was really kind of, oh God, it was like a right gut punch when they sort of said, you've got to finish that. But we did, and we found a way, and we started going out on kind of much longer walks. And actually, off the lead, he'd kind of run at first. He barked and barked and barked. I was like, at first, about 3 months. Every time he took his lead off, he'd sort of shout at me like kind of mad thing. Oh dear, I'm so sorry to hear about your doggy on the last legs, but as long as that pain's being managed, I think he's legitimate. But I'm going to come on to why that was no longer the case for Humphrey. So he was doing well. As I say, we had to adapt around not being able to take him any longer on the walks that we once did. But once we kind of got used to that, and we built a new kind of original arts and crafts house over there. Beautiful, all one house, absolutely enormous. You know, once we kind of got into that new kind of groove, it was okay. He was kind of happy enough, and so this is one of the places that became part of our kind of our routine. We started walking him at night because it was kind of quieter and cooler. We had a hot summer last year, and so we got into the habit of sort of going out, you know, when it was cooler and later, and carried on through the winter, going out with torches. And I think he found it a huge adventure. He kind of really was enjoying it. He was kind of loving life. There hadn't been any biting incidents for, I'm going to say, 2.5 years, somewhere in that kind of region. He was getting increasingly chilled, much better socialised with the dogs. So at first, he was never bad with other dogs, although he wasn't keen on black dogs, but apparently that's quite common because their vision isn't brilliant. They're a lot better at movement than they are at kind of perception of shape. And so apparently black dogs can just be like a black shape, so you can understand why that would sort of potentially kind of worry them. So he had that, but other than that, most of the dogs we'd encountered, loads of spaniels around here, and he was a sprudel, so he was a mix between a Springer Spaniel and a poodle. Ironically, when we first got him, we were told that he was not a cavapoo, a cockapoo, sorry, which is a cocker spaniel and a poodle. And they can vary quite considerably in size, because I'm sure you're aware, poodles can be kind of tiny, or they can be, you know, almost up to your waist. They can be very, very large dogs, poodles. So depending on which, the cocker spaniel and the Springer spaniel is pretty much a one-size dog. But obviously the poodle can be, you know, any number of different kind of sizes. So depending on kind of the matchup between, you know, the siren, is it siren and the bitch, is that what we call them? The dog and the bitch, whatever, you know, you're going to get different things. So we were told he was a cockapoo, and I'd kind of seen quite a few cockapoos because they were quite a fashionable dog. In fact, they were kind of one of the dogs that had got, I don't know what happened elsewhere, maybe in the States, if it happened, but during lockdown, the price of puppies shot up. And cockapoos that had been like 800 quid, 800 pounds, you know, kind of before lockdown, were now sort of selling at £3,000 to £4,000 because they're very cute, like teddy bears, you know, and there's, you know, they're ridiculous. I mean, you kind of got the silliness of a spaniel with the sheer insanity of a poodle kind of thrown in. So it's like the worst of both worlds in terms of kind of behavioural traits. They really are just plain nuts. But they were very kind of popular, very fashionable. So we picked him up thinking he was a cockapoo. And then one day I was just near our hold-let and I saw a dog. And now this dog was dark brown, whereas Humphrey, of course, had this very traditional Springer colours of being you know, kind of white and that kind of chocolatey brown. But it was just the same, you know, like physiology, the same shaped head, the same shaped jaw, the same shape, like his chest quite sort of wide, so he couldn't stop a pig in a ginnel, which means, you know, very, very big gap between his kind of front legs. And it was like, oh, do you mind? You're just telling me what the variety of your dog is, because, you know, I think that's what our dog is too. Beautiful big Victorian villas here. We're walking down Tadcaster Road now, so the old York Road. So going up there, we've got the Mount and York Micklegate Bars, probably another mile and a half up that way. So they're very grand villas, worth a lot more than my house, as we said. But we are quite close to where I live. We're going to go down and finish up down by the railway pond. As you see, my voice is kind of going because it's tough. This, you know, I'm obviously trying to keep it upbeat and keep it sort of chatty and conversational, but it is difficult. And I'm also aware that I'm probably stirring emotions amongst you in relation to pets that you've known and loved and lost. So I don't want to kind of dwell this and have it kind of go on too long. But I thought it would be quite nice to go up and finish by the pool for a bit of kind of communal kind of reflection about kind of what it means to allow ourselves to love and be loved. So jumping kind of forward then, as I say, we'd had a couple of years, 2.5 years. He's on a new painkiller. That's working well, Librela. We'd had to can the running after balls, but that's okay. We'd found a way to make that work. So we had probably the best time for him then, as you might say. That was probably the best of Humphrey during that period. But then, almost imperceptibly, and this is the thing, I think, when you you live with people or animals or anybody you're close to that you see on a daily basis is the the racecourse stands over there in the distance. You don't necessarily notice subtle changes, and certain things were happening that now I look back I can see a pattern forming, but at the time I didn't necessarily piece it together in the way perhaps that I could have done or should have done at the time. So for instance, he stopped coming up to me because my office where I work and do my 360 tours and video work that I do for the people as a sort of paid consultant, I work on the top floor, and without realising it, he just stopped coming up and he started going down to Mrs. John, who has an office, like a garden office at the end of our garden down there. So, he started sleeping more on his little doggy bed on the floor, rather than get on the sofa where historically he'd always slept on the sofa. So you start to realise, and also we had this problem with him ragging himself. And in particular, he had a problem with his neck. And sorry, let me just get a drink, and then we're going to head down towards the pond on Nelson's Lane. So we think that what happened with his neck was that, obviously, as you'll know, he managed to break his neck at some point. We don't know whether he broke it at that day or just that the chip of bone came off, because when he had his CT scan about his neck, which made us obviously realise that he needed surgery, a chip of the bone from one of his vertebrae had broken off, and it had wedged itself right next to his spinal cord, the nervous system, and that when he moved his head to one side, it caused this stabbing pain, which was absolute agony. He shrieked out and all this. So that's what that reaction is what led the vet to recommend a CT scan, saying I think it's a head or neck injury, because the vet said to me at the time, he's known dogs run after balls with broken legs. The only time they shriek like Humphrey was shrieking is when it's a neck or a spine injury. So consequently, we had to take him and get the CT scan. So that kind of revealed, but we don't know if that injury happened that day or if it's a long-term fracture in his neck, and that bit of bone had come dislodged. So we'll just never know. But obviously, that needs sorted out. So of course, as you'll be aware, he had surgery on the third vertebrae down, so kind of counting down from the back of his head, the third one down, and it was a success. It was awful to see Michelle, yeah. But of course, as with all things, he had some scar tissue. And what we think was that this scar tissue would itch under his skin. And so, and he never did this when we were there, of course, it's whenever we can leave him for a little bit. He'd have a go at his neck, and he'd rag until it was a bloody mess. Awful, real horrible mess. And so I'm sure many remember the pictures I put up with his blue collar shame, whereby, he had kind of ragged himself so much his neck was a right mess again. But again, he'd stopped doing this, and we hadn't really had a problem for, I'm going to say 18 months, 2 years. So, it had kind of settled down. But that started again. So consequently, it is helping, Catherine. It's good to talk, isn't it? There was that element to it as well. So once you start looking in retrospect, you can kind of put this stuff together. You start to kind of see a pattern forming. But as I say, there wasn't that clarity for me, kind of let's say 6 weeks ago, I suppose, when all this stuff was really starting to kind of come in, all these bits of the jigsaw were sort of slotting in. And so now he started again with his neck, but I mean, he really started going on it. It was terrible. He was just at it every day, and you'd put the blue collar on, and he'd be out for a week. But yeah, it's much nicer than a cone. The cone's horrible, hard plastic, but this was like just inflatable, a bit like an airport one. You put on those things you put on your neck to sleep. I said it was all the way around rather than just a U shape. So it wasn't kind of uncomfortable for him. It didn't have any discomfort rather, but nonetheless, obviously, he like it. He wouldn't choose it. So this was another kind of factor as he started kind of doing his neck, and then I'm going to say about three and a half weeks ago from now, there was another biting incident, and this was me this time. So the second time he bit me, and he went at my finger. He went really bad. I mean, it's still, if I put my finger there, you see that little hole? It's still really sore now. I think he bruised me right to the bone. Probably should have got a stitch in it at the time. But again, I was just more worried about him. I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? The older you are, you're able to put things in context. It was nasty. It was a shock. So again, we took him to the vets. And the kids were really worried, so I had to kind of say, look, nothing's going to happen today. You know, we'll just get the situation appraisal from the vet, and then we'll make a decision about what's best for him. Because he's a Chalfont area. Yeah, you could call it that, really. But it's that we'll walk down Nelson's Lane. So we're definitely to the left-hand side of the kind of Tadcaster Road heading out of York. But I thought I'd bring us down to kind of Railway Pond. This is a nice place to jointly reflect as we look at the water. Les, you're absolutely right, it wouldn't have been if I wasn't in pain. So that did suggest that the painkillers weren't at least having the impact, not to say they didn't necessarily stop working, but they weren't having the impact that we kind of once just taken for granted that would happen. And so took him to the vets, ever so nice lady, you know, kind of looked over him, and we basically had a couple of options. But really, they were both variants of the same thing, which was, you know, we can try with different painkillers, and we can see. But it was really another version of, let's see if he bites us again. And as we've now got, as many of you will know, you know, got a young grandson that kind of comes over, it suddenly felt it was a lot more risk we were being asked to kind of absorb, if you like, to kind of take in with this. And so I kind of came back and spoke to my wife, and we kind of chatted things over. And we really felt that, you know, he probably had his best years now, that the pain-free years were sort of at the end, and that what we were really talking about was, in effect, kind of managing his decline, and how we all, you know, we're going to be able to kind of respond to how we're going to manage that, how we're going to manage the risk, how we were going to deal with it when our young grandson was around, and all these kind of questions I think kind of come into kind of sharp focus, as well as, of course, is how can we manage his quality of life? How can we ensure that, you know, the rest of the time that he's got here is as much quality time as possible? Now, of course, you can't, you know, spare anybody pain. It would be naive to think that, you know, that was even sort of slightly possible. Of course it's not. But we decided that given everything that had happened, given the new kind of biting incident, and it'd been nasty, he'd really kind of ragged me. It wasn't just a little nip, he'd really kind of got me in his teeth and given me a good kind of shake and whatever, that if that was the kind of pain he was under, if there was no magic bullet, then we'd have to look at, you know, a kind of termination, you know, which is, sounds awful kind of saying it because it sounds so cold-blooded. It's cold-hearted rather, but it's kind of not meant to. It's simply, right from the beginning, when we'd agreed to try and manage Humphrey's pain rather than subject him to a surgery which may or may not have resolved the issues, the vet had been very clear and said, you know, there will come a day when we can't manage that pain. I need you to be aware of that and prepare for that. So it wasn't, how can I put this? Say it was a shock, of course it was, but it wasn't entirely unexpected. We always knew that this day would come. We didn't know when this day would come. So I think that's kind of is well worth saying, and for you to have it kind of forefront of your mind. But I think also, and again, I don't know to what degree this is a live one outside the UK, but right now there's a big debate about, you know, end of life care for people that are terminally ill and in pain, you know, and that can't get agency, you know, over their condition. To what degree it is fair to allow them some assistance to end their life in their own kind of manner of choosing, rather than simply be a victim of the pain and suffering and not knowing whether it's going to be a week, 2 weeks, a month, 3 months, 6 months, but at the end is already kind of penciled in. So I thought it was kind of quite interesting that was kind of going on as sort of a big national debate as a backdrop to it. But in the end, it sort of felt really quite easy for me. Not easy, the wrong word. I don't mean it was an easy decision to make, but that when I weighed everything up in and considered it in the round, it felt like it was the kind of kindest thing to do, and you could look into his eyes and his face, and he was looking older, he was looking more tired, it was taking him longer to kind of recover from things. And as I say, you know, all you can do, I think, in those situations is reflect on how many good years that you've had. Let's keep walking. We'll do a whole loop round. I'm just going to get some water. And I will read your comments just for a second. We have medical assistants dying in Canada. It's a blessing. Yeah, I mean, interestingly, I mean, Fran, in terms of the debate, you might expect that the resistance to it fundamentally might come from the medical lobby, you know, or rather, sorry, not the medical lobby, the Christian lobby, you know, sort of believing all life is sacred and all this, that, and the other. And whilst there was a degree of that, predominantly, and it's sort of surprising, really, the most of the sort of pushback, the most of the concern, was from the disability lobby, with people feeling that there was a very real chance that people that were profoundly and multiply kind of disabled would feel compelled to relinquish life because they feel like a burden. Now, I simply don't know. I've got no insight into that whatsoever. Some of you may have. I'm not going to ask you to kind of write about it, but some of you may have a view on that is much more informed than mine is. Or look at the lovely lily pads down here. It's such a lovely spot. This is a former clay pit, by the way, in case you were wondering. The all round here, terribly heavy clay soils. You know, our garden was awful drainage because of this. These are cut clay bricks. And when they basically got all the easy clay out, they basically fill it with water. They did a fishing pond. So we've got about 7 or 8 of these near to us. So, yeah, so disability kind of advocacy bodies were quite reluctant to allow it to pass without a great deal of kind of scrutiny, which is fair enough. Something like that should pass without some degree of scrutiny. But I was kind of surprised where the opposition came from. I say I could understand if it was kind of a Christian sort of pushback, but it wasn't. So I think, you know, it allows you, doesn't it, to reflect in that time then about this discord, if you like, between a discord and a discourse, between what we think about humans and their suffering and what is reasonable to put up with in the last weeks and months of your life, but also animals, because we tend to take a much more, I would say, humane view really when it comes to animals. And Emily's right, it's not a light decision to make, but I'm assuming you're talking about animal termination rather than, but I mean, both, it will be the answer, wouldn't it? But that because you do have some choice and they don't, you can choose to end their suffering. And so reluctantly, because we felt there was no other real kind of meaningful options available to us, thank you, Julie, that's what we kind of opted for. But I was really, really keen that we were going to have him at home. So the vet referred us to a very nice lady who was very sensitive and came to him, and that's where it happened, at our house. So it's as natural as it can possibly be. But that I wanted some last time with him so we could at least take him out and do some fun things and allow us really to have some sort of special memory associated. Now, as it happened, it didn't really work out that way because we suddenly realised he was going downhill a lot faster than we probably previously anticipated. So in some respects, the fact that I think it was probably about 10 days from us deciding that it was going to happen to it actually happening. And obviously that's when I posted and told you the day it happened. In fact, it was about an hour after it happened that I did that Facebook post. Easy in retrospect, that was probably a bit too long. It was very difficult for us because obviously every time you look at him, you know, you feel like you've put this dog under a death sentence, which is awful. But also, what was nice is we could suddenly spoil him. So suddenly it didn't matter how much cheese or ham he ate. Suddenly it didn't matter that he'd pick out and spit his vegetables. We just stopped giving him vegetables. And we just kind of allowed him to just have his favourite things. And we just indulged him totally. So whilst, you know, we didn't necessarily get to go to the beach and do all the things that we kind of thought that we might do, in the end, on balance, you know, it was as good as it could possibly be. And when the end came, thank you, Natalie, it was humane. It was as good as it can be. And of course, it can't be good, and it's very upsetting. Um, but, you know, that's it. We had to let go, and he had to let go of us. And what I kind of really hang on to now, throughout kind of expression, is that we gave him structure. We had an anchor. Uh, he could begin to mend, and that I don't know what happened to him early in life. You know, whether it was kind of physical or just related to the pain or whatever, but almost certainly undiagnosed, certainly untreated. You know, kind of by veterinary science. So that in those 4.5 years that we had him, at least right up till very close to the end, he had a quality of life that I think had been missing in the formative years. So the first 5, maybe even 6 years of his life, he simply hadn't had the love, or if the love that he had had been a kind of careless form of love that allowed him not to get the treatment he needed, not to get access to painkillers and so forth. And so I think that's all we can do now. Just reflect back at, and what has been an absolute kind of delight was the way that you guys took to him as well. Thank you, Julie. It felt like he chimed with the community, such a thing as a kind of a community animal spirit. That he had that. You know, he was very generous. You know, he always felt like, you sort of joke with Humphrey that he kind of felt like he knew everybody. If you go on a walk, you know, he want to stop and say hello to everybody, and get a bit of fuss and rub his ears and so forth. You know, he was never in any way reluctant to kind of share himself, and somehow, and in some way, obviously non-verbally, I think he communicated that to a lot of you, and that for many of you, I know that are no longer in a position to have pets, perhaps aren't as mobile as you once were, or you live in situations that don't allow you to have, you know, kind of furry companion. You know, he was a sense of what that was, and what it meant, and he was really good at it. He really exemplified being a kind of community dog. So it wasn't easy. It was terribly difficult. The day before, I dug his grave, which was backbreaking in the kind of clay soil, but also fitting because he's now buried at the end of our garden, just nice next to, thank you, Diane, for your lovely drawings, and Catherine as well. Just buried next to my wife's office. He's now under flag, so no animals can go scratching and get at him. And he's in there with his bed and all his favourite toys, and a lot of things that you guys sent to him over the years are in there with him, including the bat, Linda. Just a little special mention to Linda, and a few you sent things. So thank you for that. But a wonderful kind of memory with Linda and her lovely husband Alan were coming, and they came to eat with us, which was delightful in York, and taking them around Whitby and various places. We saw Whitby in the fog, or we didn't see Whitby in the fog. And you know, a week or so before, we'd had this kind of news that Humphrey was no longer able to chase a ball. So in what was the most brilliantly thoughtful present ever, Linda, who's on here, turned up at our house with a gift, and it was a bat. It was New York Mets, and it was like a dog toy, so imagine it's like a soft stuff thing. And she said, because he can't be, you know, play with the ball anymore, he's going to be a batsman. So that he was a batter. So that was wonderful. So, you know, what was left of that, and there wasn't a right lot left of it, kind of went in there, all his favourite kind of toys, and a little snaky, and so forth. So, you know, everything that was special to him is in there with him for the next life. And I think all you can really do, thank you, Lynn, yeah, your dog, our dog, absolutely, is hope that there is, and this is not just for a dog, but for all of us, really, that there is a next place, a next way of living, of being part of this organic world that we all emerge from. We all worry about what happens after we die, but we really think about, you know, what happened before we were born, do we? When we were just part of the ether, you know, the energy. And hopefully, Humphrey's gone back to that. He's found a place without pain. He's over the Rainbow Bridge. I don't know if it was Ronnie Lynn or somebody sent a lovely thing, or Cheryl, I forget who, you know, about this idea of the all go over the Rainbow Bridge and whatever was wrong with them before, you know, now that they can play in without pain, but they always keep one eye open for us. And then when it's our time, that they'll come back across the bridge and greet us. And, I'm welling up just sort of saying it really, because the thought of it is just so comforting. And it's not just for our dogs, is it? The thought of seeing our grandparents again, or people that, had a profound impact on our lives, that at some point we can go and enjoy eternity with them again. It's just so wonderful and compelling that, it brings us our emotions very, very close to the surface. So if that's what's happened, and I hope that's what happens, and I love it too, Michelle, lovely concept, then, now he's in a better place than he was. And that's not to say that we are still very much in shock and grief, because the strange thing is that not only have we not got Humphrey now, we've not got a dog. And so this is the really sort of strange things. Everything, like the fairy, exactly, Susan, yeah. Is we suddenly haven't got a dog. So all the considerations that we had about, going away and doing things, they're gone. But, also, all that sort of stuff that you accumulate like having a baby, suddenly you don't need it all. So that's been kind of really changed. So it's been a real period of adjustment. I'm sorry I've kind of bounced this tour a couple of times. They were for legitimate reasons, but equally, I wasn't quite ready to do it in the way that I've kind of done it this evening. So I do hope that you feel that as best as I can. Leslie, of course, met Humphrey. Linda met Humphrey. One or two others met Humphrey, which is fantastic. You all got your own memories of him. He was a really special boy, and I am so pleased that he was in our lives. Obviously, it really upsets me that he didn't get the care that he needed, he deserved in the early years. I get quite mad if I start thinking about it, but we can't change that now. All we can do is reflect on the happiness that he experienced with us, the security and emotional well-being that he kind of developed during that time with us, and then also that joy that you radiate outwards to other people. And as Leslie says, there's going to be other dogs, and at some point, I'm sure we'll go down there, but I may well wait now until we kind of retire properly. Obviously, there's stuff going on in our lives now that sort of pulling us in different kind of directions. So I'd definitely think twice about this. But I'll never forget the experience of having a dog. And once you've got a dog and again, I may be speaking to a part of the audience on this, I don't know. If you had a dog that attaches themselves to you and says, you're my human, it's an unbelievably powerful thing. I'm just going to turn the microphone. Coming to the end. It's a really, really kind of powerful thing. And at times, he would look at me and look into my eyes. I'd look back into his eyes. And it's like he had that kind of wisdom of 1,000 years, if that makes sense at all, if that resonates, you'll know what I'm talking about. That they have an unknowing, there's a wisdom there. It's not humanity, is it? But there's emotion, there's depth, and it's not a one-way traffic, is it? That affection. So yeah, so R.I.P. Humphrey, that's a great way to end. I promise I'm going to get back to real-time touring soon. I've been real busy. I'm doing really well, prospering at work with new business, doing 360 videos, which is fantastic, 360 tours. Picked up a new client today, which is great. But I'm going to be starting to do look into yourself, Wesley, into France. So next trip into France is going to be August, mid-August. And as some of you will know, we're actually buying a house over there to renovate. I'm going to do quite a lot of work. So consequently, when I'm in France, I'm going to be doing videos from a variety of locations. I'm going to set up a new channel on YouTube called Postcards from Picardy. So before so long, I'll drop in a link for that and start trying to live stream from there. It'd be good, obviously, if I can get back up to 500 members, but I've got 2,500 or so on YouTube. So hopefully 500 of you will agree to give my new channel a look, subscribe. And then on there, what we'll do is I will do a mixture of renovation videos. So we'll kind of start when we get the keys in August. I'm not going to live over there, but I'm going to be over there frequently, several times a year to do renovations and stay for a couple of weeks at a time. So there'll be plenty of time to go off and do trips to kind of nearby areas. And famously has been threatening for some time. He demonstrated the Parisian guides that Paris in 1080 HD is not a pipe dream. It is it's absolutely doable. So there's lots of places kind of nearby that we can kind of go to. But also I'm going to do some renovation videos in there as well. Not nuts and bolts, I'm not going to kind of show you me doing the renovation, but as it progresses, you might say, so you can kind of get a sense of what that's like, as a kind of property and how it's going to be developed. So we're in a place called Saint-Quentin, which is in northeast France. We are northeast of Paris. By train, it's kind of hour 15, pretty good, to Paris. So the kids are really excited about kind of coming to stay and be able to go and spend days in Paris and all this, that, and the other, which I think is wonderful. As a teenager, I would love to have that opportunity myself. But it's nice to be able to pass on to the kids things that we couldn't necessarily enjoy ourselves. So yeah, it's a really exciting new chapter, and of course it's a shame that Humphrey can't be part of that. But all I can do is just be grateful that he's been a kind of part of it up to now. So I'm going to have to get off because I've been on an hour, and you can probably hear my throat is dry. At times I've been fighting back the emotions and trying to have a glass of water to not a glass of water, a sip of water to try and alleviate that. But I'm feeling pretty drained now. So thank you so much, everyone, for being companions in this. And give a thought to Humphrey from time to time, and let's all try and collectively wish the Rainbow Bridge into reality, because I think we've all got skin in the game in that. And I say the thought that one day we can be reunited with those that we loved and those that loved us is an incredibly comforting thought. So thank you, Leslie. Thank you everyone who's wishing me luck for France. That is going to be happening, as I say, we think we're going to get the keys in September time. We're going over again in August to sign some papers. And so there we go. So, part of it, I said, we haven't been touring, I've been very busy, but also I kind of feel like I've sort of done York. I'm not really sure that there's many more stories that I can tell you, a place I can show you. York isn't especially big. So, of course, there's places near York that we could have got to. And again, we may well do in the future. I'm not saying that I'm never going to tour again in this country. But what excites me is obviously taking you to a whole bunch of places. So, carries out 5 rescue dogs with Humphrey now. Yes, I mean, hopefully there's just a massive doggy party going on the other side of that bridge, as Michelle's just put a little graphic there. Thank you, Linda, for that tight hug. I feel that. I kind of feel that warmth, as ever, from this community, incredibly kind of supportive. And so I'm going to bid you all adieu, and I'll be in touch very soon about the next adventures in France. So for now, thank you everybody from York, and we'll say good night. Bye bye.